durch persönliche Zuneigung und Freundschaft. I am convinced that the sentiment applies to everybody here today. We are united not only by political respect for each other, but also by deep mutual sympathy as people. And let me add this. We are also united by a shared determination to preserve European industry and with it our welfare. Flanders is doing its part. Just last week we announced the largest support program ever for Flemish industry, a program of €2 billion. That will not be enough, nor for Flanders, not for Europe. We need decisive action, we need unity, we need a coordinated and focused strategy. Idealism is not a strategy. Hope is not a strategy. Making the right focused choices is. Taking concrete action is. Showing leadership is. Europeans are counting on us. Thank you.
Dear distinguished guests, Madam President, dear Prime Ministers, last week I drafted a speech for today's event. It was full of big words, praise for the Antwerp Declaration, for each other, full of confirmations of Europe's strengths and appreciation for what we have all already achieved. I chose not to give that speech today, simply because we've heard it too many times. The world is moving on, and European industry is falling behind. This raises an uncomfortable truth. We simply have not done enough to restore European competitiveness. Europe's current playbook is not working. Dear Madam President, today's third edition of the Antwerp Industrial Summit takes place under this impression and public perception. Despite many initiatives since 2024, we still lack the big picture that will bring European industry back to growth. We are still too slow and too hesitant in implementing the bold solutions needed in the most critical time since decades. European industry is under unprecedented pressure. That is why we are here today, once again driven by a shared sense of responsibility, but also aware that key challenges remain unsolved. Across key sectors, site closures and job losses have reached a new concerning dimension. In the chemical industry alone, plant shutdowns in Europe have increased sixfold since 2022, nearly 10% of Europe's production base. Investments have stalled, and world-class companies are selling off their European assets. Already 20,000 direct jobs are lost, and roughly 90,000 indirect jobs are at risk. This is a structural shift, not a cyclical downturn. Around 30 factory workers from across Europe are joining us here today, and they remind us what is truly at stake. Behind every job stands a person, a family, a future. Every closure and every job loss leave a lasting mark on people's lives and Europe's promise on prosperity. That is why the expectation is both clear and compelling. Europe needs ambitious and decisive actions, now. Not in a year, not in 1 month, but today. Our companies face global competition every day, and we are willing and able to take on fair competition on a level playing field. In today's world, so much is about innovation, speed, and especially cost competitiveness. We simply must become more pragmatic, faster, and more focused. We must forcefully address the self-inflicted challenges that stem from our own political and regulatory choices in Europe. And we have to acknowledge that the rest of the world makes very different choices. But as Mark Carney now famously said, we take the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. We must benchmark Europe with the rest of the world, reduce anti-competitive regulation, and design new regulations more efficiently. The ongoing initiatives are commendable. However, way more efforts are needed to ensure regulation is effective in restoring competitiveness and bring investments back on European soil. Making an anti-competitive regulation simpler is just not going to cut it. Safeguarding jobs and Europe's industrial base was the core of the original Antwerp Declaration, and this remains our mission today. The Antwerp call to Altenbiesen centers on 3 essential actions. First, bring energy costs and carbon costs down. We need action on politically driven energy expenses, such as grid fees and taxes, and a reassessment of how we use domestic resources. Increasing carbon costs drive value chains out of Europe already today. Carbon costs must reflect global realities. We need short-term adjustments for ETS benchmarks and medium-term reforms for the next ETS phase to fix core issues like a CBAM that is designed to fail. It is about adjusting the system wisely to new realities, not about abolishing it. Second, strengthen the single market and global trade. Competitiveness starts at home. A stronger single market, including a true capital union, is essential. But Europe also depends on global partnerships and trade agreements that must be concluded and implemented swiftly. But one thing is equally clear. Free trade and fairness must go hand in hand. Where fairness is undermined, we must act precisely and just as decisively. Third, increase market pull for Europe for products made in Europe. Today, there is hardly any premium for products made in Europe or green products such as low-carbon, bio-based and circular products. The business case for a resilient Europe and the green transformation is often not given. Europe needs smart fiscal and market mechanisms that create predictable revenue streams and enable viable investments without sliding into protectionism disguised as resilience. We should rather incentivize the build-up of future-proof industries and make them competitive on a world scale. Madam President, our call today is simple and urgent. It's a call for bold actions in times of crisis. The main cause for the erosion of industrial competitiveness in Europe is not China, it's not the US, and it's not the Middle East. The root cause lies within Europe itself. And while this might be uncomfortable for some to hear, it also carries an important implication. The solution lies within Europe as well. And that should be motivation to go beyond just doing our best and organizing summits. We owe it to the factory workers present here, their colleagues and their families. The time for diagnosis is over. Europe now needs delivery from plans to results, from intention to impact, with one clear objective: to reboot industry in Europe now. Madam President and dear Prime Ministers, thank you for listening and thank you for engaging with us today.
Thank you, first of all, Dr. Kadri and Dr. Kamit, Prime Minister De Wever, Prime Minister Skov. Happy to see you here. Chancellor Stocker, good to have you here. Minister President Diependale, ladies and gentlemen, it is good to be back with you for indeed the third time here at the European Industry Summit. Last year, at the beginning of the new mandate, I came to share our agenda. It is shaped indeed by the Draghi and Letta report. It is headlined by the Competitiveness Compass, which is the translation of the Draghi and Letta report into milestones. One core element is the Clean Industrial Deal, our joint plan for decarbonization and competitiveness. And the year since, we have rolled up our sleeves, and the results are starting to show. So let me begin with the good news. We more than doubled investments in industrial transitions. from 52 billion euros in 2024 to 115 billion in 2025. We already made proposals to cut administrative costs for companies by 15 billion euros every year. We launched a 1.8 billion euro battery booster to scale up European battery manufacturing. We concluded new trade deals and approved 60 new projects for critical raw materials to ensure secure supply for European industry. These are just a few examples, and of course more has to be on its way and more is on its way. You demand real change faster, and Europe is changing but has to speed up further. So we must go faster. Because I know that, and you described it just, the global pressure on you is growing even more. We have all seen the news coming from here in Antwerp and elsewhere in Europe. And I must say, whenever I hear about an investment leaving Europe and about a factory at risk of closing, my first thought goes to the workers and the families who might lose a vital source of income. But I also think about what it means for Europe as a whole. Your industry is the industry of industries. The energy, the steel, the chemicals you produce underpin entire value chains. The technologies you develop are vital to Europe's independence. So together we must secure your future in our continent, and therefore again, thank you for the invitation. Europe has a lot to offer. We remain frontrunners in many areas of the clean transition. We have built world-class value chains in clean energy, pharmaceuticals, advanced manufacturing, and so much more. But competition is intensifying, and it is sometimes unfair competition. Indeed, we see massive subsidies, state-backed overcapacities, and market distortions. And this makes it increasingly difficult for European industry to compete on a level playing field. China now exports almost twice as much clean tech as we do. And this is not just a trade statistic. It is a signal of where industrial capacity is concentrating and how quickly global market positions can shift. So the urgency could not be greater. We're fighting for a place in the new global economy, and this means together we must make a strong business case for you to choose Europe. Because let me be clear, your future belongs in Europe. So, how can we strengthen the business case for Europe? You need speed, you need scale, power, and new markets to compete in an unrelenting world. Let me start with speed. Speed to expand production and grow. Scale to mobilize more investment and attract capital. And power that is abundant and affordable energy. And we need new markets to strengthen and de-risk our supply chains. And these are the priorities I would like to focus on today. Let me start with speed and new markets. In 2025, we concluded trade agreements with Mexico, Indonesia, actually 280 million people, and Switzerland. And it has been an even faster start to this year. Last month, I signed our trade agreement with Mercosur, a market of 750 million people, and a breakthrough after 25 years of negotiations, and 20% of GDP are covered by this free trade agreement. And 2 weeks ago, I was in India to sign the largest free trade agreement ever, the mother of all deals. a market of 2 billion people, 25% of global GDP. It grants Europe unique access to the fastest growing large economy, a clear first mover advantage for our businesses. And these deals will open new export markets for you and secure your supply of critical minerals. And these are benefits you will feel in your supply chains and on your balance sheets. But as you rightly so said, this is important, but not sufficient. We have also to speed up at home. In a global race, delay means lost investment. Today, it can take longer to permit a new factory than to build it. Energy projects can wait years for approval, even when financing is ready. This must change. And we have started to change it. For instance, with our wind package, it is cutting permitting times by 2/3. We are making grid connections faster, addressing a critical bottleneck for many of you, with tacit approval of permitting now. And we're making business easier and faster across the board, because as you know, we have set the targets to cut red tape in this mandate by 37 billion euro. That is the equivalent of 25% on the European level. 10 omnibuses are on their way. They are worth 15 billion euro of cuts of red tape every year. So far, so good. But of course, I'm not satisfied, and you are not satisfied with their speed. Because of the 10 omnibuses we proposed last year, only 3 have reached their destination. For the other 7 omnibuses, we count now on the European Parliament and Member States to share the same sense of urgency. And the work on European level will go on. But let me raise another topic, that is looking at the national level. There is too much gold plating. Gold plating is the extra layers of national legislation that just make your life harder and create new barriers in our single market. Let me give you an example. A truck in Belgium can weigh up to 44 tons. But if this truck drives to France and wants to cross the border with France, a border that does not exist anymore, it can only carry up to 40 tons. So 44 tons, 40 tons. In June 2023, we proposed legislation to harmonize this. Almost 2 years later, this is still under discussion by the co-legislators. Another example, shipping waste from one member state to another should be efficient, easy and quick. But different national practices, the gold plating, make it extremely complex. Some member states, for example, only accept correspondence by fax. It can take several months for traders to get green light from the authorities, depending on the different rules of the different member states. So, if we are serious about simplification, the European level has to do its share. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot to do still. But we must also crack down on gold plating and fragmentation. In other words, it's time for deep regulatory house cleaning at all levels. And this is also true when it comes to the European single market, our greatest economic asset. Here we are leaving too much potential on the table. Barriers inside Europe hurt us more than tariffs from the outside. We must therefore complete the single market in Europe if we want Europe to stay competitive in a world of giants. And that's why we will propose next month the 28th regime. The aim is to create a new, truly European company structure. We call it EU Inc. It is a company structure that will have a single and simple set of rules that will apply seamlessly all over our union for all 27 member states, therefore the 28th regime, so that business can operate across member states much more easily. Our entrepreneurs will be able to register a company in any member state within 48 hours, fully online. EU Inc. will ease access to finance in the startup and scale-up phases. It will enable smooth cross-border operations, and it will allow rapid wind down if a company fails. We hope not. So this is the speed we need, and this is Europe made easy. But as we simplify rules and speed up permitting, we must also accelerate the uptake of your clean products in Europe. Only a surge in demand will make a clear case for investment. And this is why creating lead markets is so important. And public procurement is a powerful lever. It amounts to 14% of our GDP. This is massive financial firepower controlled by European governments. But too often we see that our public buyers have to take the subsidized foreign products instead of the high-quality European alternatives. That is homegrown value that we are leaving on the table. This will be a central focus of the Industrial Accelerator Act that we are putting forward later this month. We will introduce specific EU content requirements for strategic sectors. This also includes low-carbon requirements in public procurement. And of course, this will be based on rigorous economic analysis, but it will create a stable demand for industries, and it will kick off a virtuous cycle of growth. So the aim is to let us direct more European money to our European industries. Ladies and gentlemen, this leads me to my second point about scaling up investment. You urgently need better access to low-cost capital. And the structural solution to this is to build a deep and liquid capital market. This is the essence of our proposal for our Savings and Investment Union. And the completion of the Savings and Investment Union can unleash up to 470 billion euros of investment. And to let you know that I am determined to make it happen this time, after we've debated a capital market union since at least 10 years. We want to do this by 27. But if this is not possible at the end of this year, I will propose to go with those who want to speed up and enhance cooperation. For that, you need at least 9 member states. As I said, I want it by 27, but if it is necessary to speed up the whole process, we will go by enhanced cooperation. But as global competition intensifies, investments are also vital to catalyze private money. So let me also focus on this. Last year, I was here in Antwerp with a promise. I said we would change our rules for state aid to your sectors to make it faster and more predictable. And this is exactly what we've done. And in response to those new state aid rules, member states have already mobilized more than 21 billion euro in state aid to clean industrial projects. The next step is now to channel more resources from our emissions trading system into your industries. I know there's a lot of discussion. The emission trading system, ETS, brings clear benefits. Since it was introduced in 2005, the emissions dropped by 39%, while the economy in sectors covered by ETS has grown by 71%. So this shows that decarbonization and competitiveness can go hand in hand. And revenues of ETS have been generated by over 260 billion euros since 2005. On the European level, 100% of these revenues were reinvested in industrial innovation. 100%. For example, the 100 billion euro Industrial Decarbonization Bank is a good example for that. Next week, we're concluding the first pilot auction worth 1 billion euros. It will finance the decarbonization of how you fire furnaces, melt metals, or mix chemicals. And more support to your industries will be available once the bank is operational. But member states invest less than 5% of the ETS revenues in industrial decarbonization. So I believe it is high time, and I will raise the topic tomorrow at our retreat, that member states step up and match our level of support. That is channeling more ETS revenues back to industry. This will therefore be a core focus also of the upcoming reform of our emission trading system this summer. Because these resources come from the industry, and we've told you that we will always and have to reinvest it in the industry itself, where the money does come from. My third and final point is reliable, affordable energy. This is central to making the business case for Europe, especially for the energy-intensive sectors. Prices are still too high and too volatile. And we know the reason for this. Gas prices drive the energy prices up. Renewables and nuclear drive prices down. The gas price last year in Europe was on average 100 euro per megawatt hour. The price for renewables was on average 34 euros per megawatt hour. And the gas price for nuclear was between 50 and 60 euro per megawatt hour. The data is telling. Of course, this is an average, so in different regions it's different. So the good news is we are well positioned to lower costs. In 2025, for the first time ever, we produced more electricity from solar and wind than from all fossil fuels together. Our battery storage capacity has more than doubled in the past 2 years. And in the past 2 years, nuclear, our largest single energy source, actually increased. But more is needed to stabilize and lower the prices. So the next few years are crucial, because the International Energy Agency tells us that gas prices that are going down now are expected to go down also, or stay down in the next 3 to 4 years. So we should use this time to invest in low-carbon energy system that will protect us when fossil fuel prices go up again. It's a matter of time, then they will go up again. For that, we need the infrastructure for true energy union, because price spikes in the one country could often be avoided if cheaper energy could flow across the border. And we have a blueprint to address this. This is the European grids package that is on the table, proposed by the Commission. As part of it, we are fast-tracking the construction of energy highways all across Europe. Let me give you one example. example, we started last month with an agreement on the Bornholm Energy Island. It will connect offshore wind from the Baltic Sea to the Danish and the German national grids. So it will transform the Baltic wind from a national resource into shared European power. So we will tackle all these bottlenecks one by one. And the goal is simple. Clean energy must flow freely all across our union so that cheap energy can flow where it is needed, when it is needed. In addition, we must drastically modernize our energy taxation. While energy costs are going down, national taxes on energy are going up, and the taxes that industry pays on electricity are 15 times higher than taxes on gas. This is just wrong. So we are working with the national governments to reduce the tax burden and bring prices down. Finally, we must make greater use of power purchase agreement and contracts for difference. We need them in all member states and not only for large companies, because locking in energy prices protects you from volatility and lets you plan for the long term. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude. We need everyone in our union to help move them forward. Our proposals are on the table. We need national governments, the European Parliament, the European Commission, all to play their part. We need you, the business and trade union leaders, to keep advocating for bold action, what you're doing today. The summit is about listening to your priorities and your proposals. And indeed, tomorrow, at the informal meeting of the European Council, I will discuss with leaders how to match the pace you need. It is time to further accelerate so that you can invest in your future right here in Europe. Thank you very much, and long live Europe.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Prime Minister Schoof, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to address you today at this European Industry Summit. An excellent timing, by the way, just the day before the informal European Council tomorrow. And I think it's an excellent opportunity for us to listen to you, to your urgent priorities and demands that we can discuss tomorrow further. First of all, let me say that I believe that this summit is about so much more than competitiveness in our continent's industrial future. And the same is true, by the way, for tomorrow. Because our economy is about our security. Our economy is about our independence. And our economy is, of course, about the future of prosperity as well. The geopolitical fast lane we live in today must surely urge us to keep an open dialogue between the European industry and political leaders. Because only together we will be able to shape an economic framework that is sustainable and secure in today's geopolitical and geoeconomic turbulence. In fact, there is so much to win. If we would make full use of our internal market and deepen our investment union, our GDP would grow by 7%. So let's fasten our seatbelts together and face the challenges ahead that, to me, should be the goal of this summit. With that in mind, I want to highlight 3 essentials today that are imperative for the Netherlands as one of Europe's most open, innovative economies, and make a plea to accelerate our efforts to reach these goals together. So, Ursula, I'm with you. Firstly, we need to make things as simple as possible and create an enabling environment within Europe in order to make the European industry future-proof and unlock its full and clean potential. We must tackle unjustified barriers, the so-called terrible 10, to create the right circumstances to increase the demand for clean products and solutions. For instance, we recognize that lead markets for green chemistry will need to be created to facilitate the feedstock transition. This is vital for our future competitiveness. This is also why the Netherlands is firmly represented in the European Critical Chemical Alliance, alongside many of the companies present today. And as I've discussed much more often with you, we must tackle high energy prices by investing more in interconnected cross-border energy grids and streamline permitting processes. We value what the upcoming Industry Accelerator Act and the Circular Economy Act is seeking to do, creating measures to stimulate clean demand in industrial sectors, for example, through labeling product standards. Secondly, innovation in the energy transition is a key driver for economic growth. Competitiveness, economic security and decarbonization should go, therefore, hand in hand. We must swiftly stimulate the rollout of renewable energy and industrial decarbonization to create a sustainable and competitive future. And the Netherlands is well aware that consistent and predictable policies are essential for the long term. And we have to unlock private investment. That is why the MFF should be used to its full potential to unlock private capital, and we need to deepen our saving and investment union, making full use of the strategy prompted out by the Commission last year. Thirdly, Europe needs to become more independent for certainty and security. This means that we must continue to conclude and deepen free trade agreements that enhance our global competitiveness while ensuring robust, resilient supply chains. Access to finance is equally crucial, empowering our businesses to innovate and grow in an ever-evolving economic landscape. We also need an integrated European value chain strategy. For this critical raw material partnership with South Africa, Australia, Chile and Canada are indispensable in this endeavour. After all, strong and resilient supply chains are key to a competitive EU and an equal level playing field. For example, we cannot allow chemical byproducts to flood the European market, jeopardizing critical supply chains. We know that this is happening and we recognize the dangers to our strategic autonomy. Of course, all this requires close collaboration between governments, industry and relevant stakeholders. We must do this with Europe and remain open to third countries. This way, the EU remains the most attractive trading partner in the world. Together, we can work towards a prosperous, sustainable and competitive industrial future for Europe. Together, we keep Europe safe, secure and independent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prime Minister. So as the Chancellor Stoker joined us, so if I can ask you to take the floor. Welcome.
Dear President von der Leyen, dear Prime Minister De Wever, dear Prime Minister Schoof, dear Vice Presidents and Commissioners, dear CEOs and business representatives, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by thanking Bart De Wever for organizing this summit. As you all know, the EU leaders of the 27 member states will meet tomorrow to discuss how we can strengthen our competitiveness. What can be more useful than getting a reality check on the day before? But thank you for providing us with this valuable possibility to listen to those that actually know what the situation looks like on the ground. The companies that employ hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. Those that know what the hard competition with China, the US and the rest of the world really means. Your success has been and still is the backbone of Europe's prosperity, of our strengths and of our resilience. The European project has always been based on economic success. Safeguarding our strengths is therefore not only an economic question, it is also a deeply political task. If we don't protect our competitiveness, we will also fail at solving all the other challenges that we are faced with. Economic competitiveness has been my main task since I took office as the Federal Chancellor of Austria. When I started, Austria was in a deep recession and inflation was very high. Thanks to many domestic measures, we have been able to improve the situation. Today, Austria returned to economic growth and inflation has fallen to 2%. However, Austria is definitely still not where it should be. In order to get there, we need success on the European level. How to get there? I see 5 priorities. Priority number 1, energy costs must go down. This is Europe's most obvious competitive disadvantage. Wholesale prices for energy in Austria are today still more than double those of 5 years ago, even though we are capable of producing huge amounts of cheap, sustainable energy. Why? Because the market forces us to always pay the price for gas, which is much higher than that of all other forms of energy. This is not sustainable. This is not just a problem in Austria. I had a meeting with the Prime Ministers of Czechia and Slovakia yesterday in Bratislava, and we all agree nothing hurts us more than high energy prices. I see 2 options. We must either permanently reduce the gas price towards pre-crisis levels, or we change the pricing mechanism. We should not be afraid to question the merit order system if it does not serve us any longer. Priority number 2, extend free allowances in the emission trade system. We can only afford the green transformation if our industrial base is strong. The ETS path until 2034 is too steep and too ambitious. If we do not change course, we will not make the world greener, we will only make Europe poorer. Also here I want to underline that this is not only my position. The Prime Ministers of Czechia and Slovakia have the exact same situation in their countries. Do not get me wrong. Climate change needs to be addressed and tackled. We just have to admit that the approach we took in the beginning was too extreme. Fortunately, the trend reversal has already begun, but more will be necessary. Priority number 3, complete the single market. The so-called 28 regime could facilitate access to domestic and capital markets for startups. This ambition of thinking outside the box is exactly what we need. We have to continue and intensify our efforts to reduce bureaucracy and work towards real deregulation on the EU level. Of course, many barriers exist at national level. As member states, we also have to do our homework. We must also remove unjustified territorial supply constraints. It is unacceptable that citizens in smaller countries pay more for the same products than citizens in larger countries. Finally, we must speed up our work to complete the savings and the investment union. It's crazy that every single year more than 330 billion euros of European capital are invested in the US. Imagine what it means for European innovation, entrepreneurship and jobs if that money stayed in Europe. When we should change this, if not now? Priority number 4, a commitment to European preference. Not out of protectionism, but because European competitiveness and prosperity should be safeguarded. We are ready to put billions of euros into reconstruction of Ukraine as soon as lasting peace can be achieved, but we also have to ensure that it's European business that rebuild Europe. And finally, priority number 5, fair trade agreements. We need strategic trade agreements to help our markets grow and to supply our industry with the materials and input needed to succeed. I commend President von der Leyen, who has already made much progress in the last year, for instance, in Indonesia or in India. At the same time, we must stop unfair market practices by third countries. With that, I conclude my remarks and look forward to hearing your views. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor, and thank you to all our esteemed guests for sharing your perspective. As we now move on to the discussion under Chatham House rules, I kindly invite members of the press to leave the room. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam President. You will be always invited, I believe. So you already gave us you're okay to see you back and here. And I must say, I have witnessed 3 years in a row you come in, engage in, pursuing the conversation between two summits. Between you and me, I never thought a EU president would use the word ETS benchmarks. Truly appreciate your focus and willingness to discuss. Thank you for your leadership and thank you again for being here. It's invaluable. One remark for the head of states. Your colleagues in the Member States Climate Change Committee will vote on these benchmarks already at the end of the month. So decide tomorrow to postpone this and then say you hope to welcome for next year. But having said that, we truly hope to have you next year with maybe more than 50% progress. You can count on our support and we know you cannot do it alone. And I think this is loud and clear. Madam President, if we have 600 attendees, it's because people do believe that Europe can make it. That's why we are here. And you are our hope. I know you will continue to engage in many different formats, including in this one, and we take good note of your willingness to meet again. This is why we had the honor to welcome prime ministers, chancellors, and I know President Macron and Chancellor Merz are joining us later today, and we will be loud and clear that they all need to step up. So by now, I would like to invite the Prime Minister of Belgium, Bart De Wever, for his closing remarks.
Madam President, liebe Ursula, Minister-President, beste Matthias, colleagues, Prime Ministers, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to welcome you back again in my hometown of Antwerp in our magnificent 16th century stock exchange. A year ago, I stood here only a few weeks into my mandate as Prime Minister, still wet behind the ears. And today, I'm a little bit less wet, but not less concerned. In recent weeks, I have had intensive discussions with many leaders of industry, many of them here present today among us. And frankly, those conversations were a cold shower. So again, I felt wet behind the ears. But at least I know I have to keep my powder dry. Last year, I said that Europe must never become an industrial museum. The birthplace of the Industrial Revolution cannot turn into a beautiful heritage park where visitors admire the prosperity of the past while the future is built elsewhere. The follow-up report to the Antwerp Declaration by Deloitte shows that 83% of the pillars meant to strengthen our competitiveness have seen no progress or even deterioration. When I say this, this is not an attack on the European Union and certainly not on the President of the Commission who works relentlessly. But reality, unfortunately, is what it is. A recent report commissioned by CEFIC on the chemical sector, the backbone of the European industry, presents a chilling list of closures and declining investments. Over the past 4 years, announced closures in the European chemical industry increased sixfold, representing a loss of almost 10% of the European chemical production capacity. In countries like ours, Germany, the Netherlands and France, the situation is simply dramatic. We are at the brink of an existential crisis. And the reasons are well known. I've heard them all the afternoon: energy costs, overall competitiveness, regulation and Chinese dumping. I'm not going to repeat what you all said. We all know we must change course, and we all know the direction. Yet it sometimes feels like we're standing on the bridge of the ship, staring at the horizon without being able to touch the helm. So today, this is a call to arms. Let us take responsibility. No one else will do it for us. The people in this room will determine the future of European prosperity. In my own country, I made 3 promises to my industry: lower energy costs, more competitive labor costs, and simpler rules. And we have reduced structural labor cost handicaps. We have introduced compensation mechanism for energy-intensive companies in which we used the new decisive instrument, and we have screened dozens of regulatory requirements. The Flemish region also, Matthias, has taken important steps freeing budgets to support industry and also making permitting faster, more predictable and legally robust, potentially cutting lead times for major projects and increasing legal certainty for investors. These are all good steps, but they are not miracle solutions. They are choices, and they show that progress is possible, but we know that the road remains very long. Ladies and gentlemen, if we want to talk about the future of our industry, we must first believe that our industry is the future. A year ago, I was not convinced that this belief was yet widely shared. Today, I'm a bit less skeptical about that, but the growing belief must translate now into urgent action. And we must start from what is feasible, not from what is desirable. Everybody agrees on what we want. The real question is what is workable in practice to get there. Pragmatism is not a compromise. It is a precondition for resilience. Jacques Delors once said that the single market should serve as a triangle: economy, technology and defense. And industry is the thread connecting these three. Without industry, no technological leadership. Without technology, no defense capability. And without those two, no strategic autonomy. If Europe neglects its industrial base, it does not only lose growth, it loses influence, and ultimately it will lose sovereignty. And so we require urgent action on three fronts. First, we need to give industry room to grow and not rules that hold it back. Carbon costs continue to rise, regardless of industrial growth. Definitions on what is green are sometimes so rigid that they slow down innovation rather than accelerate it. We need technological neutrality, including for hydrogen, carbon capture, nuclear energy and other transition technologies. We should judge solutions by results, not by labels. On administrative simplification, cosmetic surgery will not be enough. We need shock therapy. That means measurable commitments. We must urgently accelerate the ambitious goal of reducing administrative burden on all businesses by 35% within this mandate, with fewer reporting obligations, faster permitting and one-stop shops for strategic projects. In addition, we must review all legislative proposals to assess their impact on competitiveness. Freezing existing legislation or scaling back new regulation should not be a taboo. Much has been said about the Letta and Draghi reports. Yet, after 1 year, barely 1 in 10 of Draghi's recommendations has been implemented. And precisely in energy and digitalization, two decisive domains, progress has been the slowest. Meanwhile, the annual compendium of obstacles in the single market keeps getting thicker every year. So we seem to be finding or adding barriers faster than we remove them. Our labor productivity is already 20% lower than that of the United States. Today in the European Union, over twice as many people work on implementing and monitoring rules than on innovative research. 1.7% of our workforce is busy inventing the technology of the future to make our world more prosperous and more sustainable. In the meantime, 3.9% of our workforce is spending its days managing regulation. That is a horrific structural disadvantage we can simply not afford. We need an environment where our industry can move forward, not one where rules hold it back. Second front, where action is needed, we need partnerships that make us stronger, not dependencies that make us weaker. We do not want a Europe first, and certainly not a Europe alone. Personally, I prefer the slogan "Made with Europe" over the slogan "Made in Europe." Let us not copy another man's stupidity. Economic resilience does not mean isolation. It means strength to cooperation. We live in a world increasingly shaped by power politics. The United States and China both pursue industrial strategies built on scale, speed and state support. They think in terms of winning and losing. Europe has always believed in win-win. The economy is not a zero-sum game, and that should remain our strength. But we must ensure that we do not turn ourselves into the losers of somebody else's game. In energy, for instance, we should not replace one dependency with another. In energy supply, critical raw materials, semiconductors, batteries and defense equipment, we must diversify supply chains and secure reliable partners with whom we can trade on a level playing field. We cannot stand idly by while other countries, such as China, massively dump their goods on our market to the detriment of our businesses. We really cannot continue to respond to this by setting up working groups and calmly considering new rules. No, this requires a coherent, flexible and above all, decisive and assertive approach now. Industry today is also security policy. The war in Ukraine has reminded us that steel, chemicals, chips and energy are not abstract economical variables. They determine our capacity to defend ourselves. Many partners are eager to work with us. ASEAN countries, India, Canada, Australia, Mercosur, finally. We should move faster on trade agreements, and I thank the Commission President for all she's done for that. We should move faster on strategic partnerships, on supply chains, not out of ideology, but out of necessity. Third and final front. We want businesses to invest here, to build here, to expand here. But Europe accounts for barely 5% of global venture capital. The United States attracts roughly 10 times more. Too many of our scale-ups move abroad when they grow. We are already behind at the starting line. A true savings and investment union is essential for the long term, but in the short term, we must urgently accelerate our efforts to bring in and grow new, critical and strategic projects on European soil. The technological race is not a sprint, it is a hurdles race. So new players can catch up and leaders can stumble. Europe may be lagging, but we're still very much in the game. We must actively attract and scale strategic projects. Clean tech, defense manufacturing, advanced materials, AI, life sciences. Europe can still make itself indispensable to build and expand such industries worldwide. Certainly, if we can also make a leap forward in integrating the European market, there are still so many barriers for trading services and goods within the EU itself. If we want to combine our need for investments with the ambition to create an ecosystem for sustainable technological innovation and growth, we need to bring down obstacles and capitalize on every opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe remains an attractive market. Democratic, rules-based, free, market-oriented, stable and with respectful leadership. The rest of the world envies us, or a lot of the rest of the world still envies us for this, and also for our hundreds of millions of consumers and rich savings. And the rest of the world is surely watching us, some with goodwill, others with less benign intentions. If we want economic resilience, strategic strength and sustainable prosperity, a strong industrial base is indispensable. You are the key to prosperity. You are the key to power and influence to change the world for the better. And the momentum is now. With the next multi-annual financial framework ahead of us, we must set priorities. Europe must stop trying to do everything, everywhere, all at once. There's a clear trinity of top priorities: innovation, productivity, competitiveness. That is where our focus must be. If not, the decarbonization of Europe will become synonymous with its deindustrialization and eventually with its poverty and its irrelevance. It's up to us. If we want Europe to matter in the world, our industry must matter first to us. I thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your steady support for the industry, and with the loud applauses. It tells us that this closing speech for our session was actually highly appreciated. I would also like to thank everyone for being here today. I feel truly honored to have been able to lead this effort together with Sefik, Marco, and all our partners, suppliers, customers, SMEs, social partners, the workers who are here. Thank you all for taking the time despite your busy schedule. And we will all remember, act now. And a special thank you to the Sefik team before I give the floor to Marco. I know how much work and dedication this requires behind the scene. Now I would like to invite everyone to join us for our traditional family photo. You will be guided to the area by our miracle man, Marco Mensing.
No pressure. For those of you who have been here before, first of all, I'm going to be very directive and Dutch. Madam President, you've done this last year. Those sitting on this round table, please stay seated. The workers, can you please stand up and go to the stage? Those in battle gear, head over to the stage, please.
And give them a round of applause.
Absolutely. We sent them an email saying we have a strange meeting you might want to attend, and I can tell you it's been overwhelming. Those sitting out there next to the stage on the chairs, can you please stand up from your chair and get under the balcony over there? With apologies, because we'll remove. And then I'll make it very, very simple. If you're sitting on those people here can stay, more or less. If you're sitting on a luxury black seat, with right behind the speakers here, please go to the back of the stage. So those sitting on a luxury black seat, not the ones behind, please go to the back rows of the stage. Then those who sit on a wonderful white seat, you will stand in front of the people with the black seat. And those around the round table will come in and move first. So this is not only an engineering feat, this is a proof to all the politicians that industry can work together. It's a very scary event. And then for those who are sitting on the white seats, please indeed in front. Those at the round table, your names are on the floor. And you will see on your table a little schedule. So if you allocate yourselves the distance from President von der Leyen, you will know where we need you to be there. So if the black seats are there, I will come over here. Are we good with the seats? Can I invite the round table to start moving to the front as well, please? You found your place? I might find a place. You're here. Extra. Wensing. Stove. Thank you. You found your way.
Hey, Marco. Hoe gaat het?
Heel goed.
The two of you know each other well, I guess. Maybe I should invite you to connect. I don't know. Okay, that's very good. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
Ilan, please. So, Dutch Prime Minister, Mr. Vasiliadis. No, you're on the left here.
Where do I have to be?
Je hebt een plaatje.
Ja.
Stokkertjes in één. Vasiliadis over hier. Follow het plaatje.
Ja, het is een moeilijke.
Sorry. Good. Mr. Radcliffe over here.
Oh, yeah.
Where is this?
Come it.
There?
So you're here? Yep. I can't find anything. Sorry. Then you come stand next to Mr. Hoekstra. The tall guys. No. Yep, I'm there. So on stage, we'll take two pictures. The first picture, you look straight ahead. That's a simple one. The second picture, you look up to the balcony where there's a person waving over there. First up there. So look up to the waving guy and smile. And then we're going to look down to the people in front of us. There's more cameras running in from the right. So if you keep your smile for a second longer. Philippe, do we have the boards? 2 more minutes. And then I'd like to ask you to stay on stage when the President leaves us, so we have a bit of room for President von der Leyen and the Prime Ministers to move out. Thank you very much for the picture, Madam President. Marcus? Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Ilan? For all others, there's a coffee break before we start the session with Commissioner Hoekstra and EVP Ribera. And the Ribera session for those registered is upstairs. Séjourné is cancelled.
Moesten wij niet blijven voor de foto bij de Wever? Of,
gaat niet meer lukken nu, want we gaan nog bij de uitgang doen. Dus als jullie meekomen naar de uitgang, laat me even kijken. Nee, blijf maar even hier. Blijf maar even. No, sorry.
Andere ambitionen, ja, die moesten waar.
Mag ik u nog één ding vragen? De werkers zouden graag een foto met u willen hebben. De workers, de mensen met een battle gear.
Of course, ja.
Is dat oké?
Dank u wel.
de beste speech wat die van u.
Dank u wel.
De meest compacte.
Take a picture. Ja, foto hier met de Wever. Philip, I need a camera.
Niet de workers nog een keer nodig?
Ja, we gaan hier staan met z'n allen, met Bart erin.
Dan moet ik mijn collega's
Wat erbij? Ja. Ah, cool.
Goed gedaan, man. Goed gedaan.
Stapje.
Voilà. Nog.
Ik ga meneer de Wever even vragen. Terug op het podium. Ga omhoog. Ga omhoog. Er blijven hier te veel mensen staan. Dan komt meneer de Wever daar. Yes, mag ik u uitnodigen?
Ja, natuurlijk. Zij moet dat allemaal leveren. En ze heeft kwaai pappenheimers in haar club zitten. Hè? Ik snap dat wel, hè? Zowel in haar commissie als een aantal. Ja, oké. Hey, ça va?
Oké. Yep. Can we free up room for the cameras here, please? Mag ik u vragen om even uit de weg te gaan? Sorry, mag ik?
Geen probleem.
Guys, can you move out of the way? And we take a picture with Dr. Wave and the workers. Dank u, meneer Van Boksmeer.
Go. Alles goed?
We zijn halverwege.
Ja, dat is allemaal mooi georganiseerd.
Super. Een dikke merci voor alle werkers uit Antwerpen. En dan gaan we nu aan de koffie. Really well done. Now we get a president and a Bundeskanzler. Yes. Okay.
We've lost our chancellor. Have you by chance seen him?
No.
No, good.
Hi, great.
Thank you. Do we need SEPEC team? Do we need SEPEC team, or we leave it like this, a bit chaotic?
For the picture or to
No,
get
pictures
some
are
help?
done. Do we need SEPEC team? No, they start building the stage.
Yes.
Well done. Dank u. So for everyone, we're rebuilding the stage. So we have the Hoekstra session as soon as the stage is finished. For everyone, we're rebuilding the stage so that we have the Hoekstra session as soon as the stage is finished. Those who are in the session for EVP Ribera should go upstairs via the stairways. Waar is een toilet?
Ja. Met trappen.
And I figured out who the lady was. She worked for von der Leyen. She's a part of her delegation. So.
Yeah, but I mean, calm down.
That's true.
I think this is for the breakout sessions.
Yeah, I think so.
But they put me like in a breakout session, but I don't know what that is. You see?
Yeah, I think that's gonna happen now with Hoekstra.
Everyone then.
I guess. Otherwise, follow Camilla.
Yeah. I don't know, now she disappeared. But sometimes I feel like I should not follow her, you know? Sometimes I'm like, maybe I stress her more, I don't know, because I'm like, like a dog.
I also have to go to the toilet.
Go quickly, you want to...
No, my dad will be back and give me, and then I say I'm not here for like 5 minutes. Bye.
At the end we should take a picture.
Yeah, we should.
I'm cold.
I'm okay, but it's more just some like running around doing stuff.
I'm always cold. My problem.
But if you're from Italy, this is dat zien we nog wel. Nou, ja, het staat nu uit. Maar ik ben bang dat als hij weer begint...
Do you know if they can give like a certificate that we attended today?
I don't think so, because it's not an official like course or something. You can take the pictures.
Yeah.
That's proof.
Congratulations. Thank you. The nice thing is it's a team of 4. We're not the European Council, we're not professionals, we do this for fun.
No, but it's great.
Thank you.
Really community.
I now need to manage the French president. You know how to do it.
Yes. See you later.
Appreciate it for coming.
You see Europe more present in Europe. No.
Size message.
What organization? Need something for
Definitely. Encantado. We zien het straks gratis. Kun je die... Ja, die heb ik nodig. En hier... Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. You didn't know that?
So, are you going to rewrite your thesis?
Actually, yeah, I should continue.
Ik breng deze wat
part 2.
You have an internship.
Wil je pen?
Yeah. Thank you.
Ja.
Next.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please ask the persons for the Ribera session to go upstairs? And can I please ask the persons for the Hoekstra session to take a seat?
Gaan we zitten of gaan we staan?
Can we have sound, please?
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we meet once again in the Antwerp Handelsbeurs. We are a bit tight for time, but we have a very important conversation here. Welcome to all of you. Commissioner Hoekstra, welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to meet again in arguably a very important week for Europe's competitiveness agenda. 2 years ago, Europe's industry came together to call for an industrial strategy. A year ago, almost to the day, you were here, the Commission President was here to launch the Clean Industrial Deal as a response to that call. Today, fast forward, context is rapidly evolving. We have a lot that's ongoing, many challenges that remain. Before we go to questions from the audience here, let's set the scene just a bit. Clean Industrial Deal is now 1 year in motion. Where do we stand? What have been some of the tangible impacts that industry here can see on the ground as a direct result of the CID?
Do we have sound? Yeah, we do have sound. Well, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, very good to see you. And I think I know, and I've met even more people in the audience than a year ago, which I think is testimony to the whole thing that we are trying to pull off. And that is making sure we truly do this together. We truly work together to make sure we don't just have climate policy, but we do manage to make sure they go hand in hand with competitiveness and independence. Anna, to your question, where are we and what have we done? A lot has been done, but much more is needed. And frankly speaking, I think much more is needed also at considerably higher speed. Why? Well, because the world is evolving and many of the trends that we see work against us rather than in favor of us. That's just the geopolitical reality we're currently facing. So of course I'm tempted to sum up many of the things that we did accomplish in terms of simplification, in terms of huge investments in clean tech and batteries, in terms of making sure we have investments ready for grids and we connect Europe much more going forward, in terms of creating lead markets, which for example we're doing in steel, in the domain of CBAM, which was a very lively conversation also last year. But again, the last thing I want to display here is any notion of complacency. This is urgent, much more needs to be done, and as I've said last year to all of you, what we need to have is a programmatic approach that stays with us for years to come, that delivers in the short, the medium and the long term. And so on each of these issues, whether it is clean tech, whether it is specific industrial problems, whether it is batteries, whether it is grid investments, whether it is independence, whether it is demand management, all of that needs to see more action at both the European and a national level.
So many areas of progress, yet we're here, the mood is sharper, challenges remain on the ground. Some say Europe's really at, or its industry is at a tipping point. Where do we go from here? How does that change or impact your diagnosis of the competitiveness and decarbonization agenda?
So I would argue that many of the elements that we have put on the table are actually the right ones. And that if you talk to whether it is leaders in industry, also in leaders in more broadly in business or in the political domain, there is a larger amount of agreement on, let's say, the direction of travel, on simplification, on clean tech, on grid investments, in making sure that competition is there and is needed, but it is also fair and we're doing more to protect our level playing field. And I can prolong the list. I typically tend to add, and that is something where maybe not all politicians in Europe agree, that on top of that we need to speed up the single market. We need to do much more in delivering the capital markets union, and we need reforms at a member state level. And as a politician, I know that that is complicated, but we simply need to make sure we have more economic growth if we want to deliver on the whole set of priorities. So the direction of travel, I think, is to a very large degree is something many people agree on. The difficulty, in my view, is to speed up the delivery, because the problems are getting more pressing. And my experience, also coming from business, is that both at a national level and at a European level, and I'm not going to say that it is all a disaster, we're doing our utmost, but the speed of delivery simply needs to go up. We need to be quicker on our feet. That's part of the reality of what we're facing.
Yeah, we're in a room full of CEOs, as we were last year. They have to make very tough decisions about where to place the next wave of investment going further. You know this, you have a private sector background yourself. What's the one signal they should take home here from where you see Europe's industry going next?
Look, I'm biased. So of course I'm going to tell you, invest it here. And if you're not convinced yet, then let's have that conversation. Let's talk about how we make that viable. But let's also be realistic, and that is something, of course, you need to decide on yourself, on the alternatives. Look at what is happening with our American friends. And look at what is happening with predictability. If you look at how certain sectors are being treated, how lawyers are being treated, how universities are being treated, how the central bank president is being treated. Is that really the predictability and the type of investment environment that most companies look for? Or let's look at China. And I know that the temptation is there as well. And I understand that diversifying is part of the answer. But are we really sure, with all that is going on geopolitically, a country with the assertiveness in the region, typically also on the top of problems for many European politicians and American politicians. All that is going on also in their different sectors, where they simply apply different rules for you when you operate there than we do when they operate here. Is that really the bet you want to make? I think we need to do more at home. I'm convinced that all the elements that I mentioned, from simplification, from deregulation, from investments, and that is going to cost quite a bit of public money, more is needed. But if I were to decide on investments, I would think again when I would be tempted for either China or the US.
Right. We have many questions that come from the floor, and I want to look towards Marco here, who is right there on cue, partner in crime, to take some of those questions, because there's a lot that's coming here, whether energy prices, carbon pricing, etc., that come into play. So, Marco, please do help us out here.
Definitely, and thank you again for joining us. It's been a pleasure. The first question I would like to hand over to the steel sector, to Geert van Poelvoorde.
Thank you, Marcus. Good afternoon. Geert van Poelvoorde, ArcelorMittal. So, thank you, Commissioner. You have seen that yesterday we announced our first big investment in France for 1.3 billion euro. The reason why we had taken this step is that we are confident enough that the measures that have been taken by the Commission and in the several member states are good enough to have a business case for this investment. Now, there's one question I would like to ask you, and also thank you very much that you stayed strong in the FTA agreements with India for the steel sector. But one question on the CBAM. So there are still some very big loopholes where we're very concerned on, and you know, one of them is the resource shuffling and the risk we have there on circumvention. So now the Commission has proposed that there will be a reaction when they detect abuse. But for us it is not so clear, how are you going to follow this, how are you going to detect this, because circumvention and resource shuffling will happen, it's just a matter of time. So the payment of the CBAM is in 2027, in September, so there's a long time from now. So how are we going to monitor that and detect that and act when there is this circumvention?
No, thank you, and also thanks very much for the hugely important investments you've been making. And if that is okay, and if Marco agrees, I am going to misuse the question to first say something else I think that is important for the sector, and then I come to CBAM. If you look at steel and what the Commission has done in the last year, I think that is exactly testimony to the type of dialogue we've had last year. Because then we have acknowledged, I think, together, the dumping on the European market. The fact that if steel disappears from Europe, it's certainly not going to get cleaner. As a matter of fact, you're going to have another dependency in return. And by the way, you're going to lose jobs. So there we have intervened, I would say, quite assertively. And indeed, the result is that you are making investments. Yesterday, in my own home country, Tata Steel, the largest emitter of the country, asking us to stay the course, sending a letter to the Dutch Prime Minister to stay the course on ETS, because they want predictability, they want this system to work. Now, specifically on CBAM, which I think is a great addition to the ETS system, but let's also agree that the design as it was initially made needed improvements. We've made 4 improvements, which I think are all very important for European industry. First, and that was a direct result of this conversation, radical simplification of the design. I've taken 90% of companies out of the scope, while keeping 99% of emissions within scope. That's one. Secondly, making sure we help those who are exporting so that they don't face an unfair competitive disadvantage. Third, and that was something that many industries in Europe have asked for, scope. So not just look at the raw product, but also look at the proverbial washing machine. And the fourth element, and that's exactly what you are alluding to, let's make sure that we don't get fooled. And I think that's a very reasonable ask. So what we have now in the system is the ability to monitor and to check at a very granular level what is coming in. And if that doesn't satisfy us, we will immediately go to default values at a country level. Is that the end of the gaming? For sure not, because whatever rule we devise, there's always someone who's trying to game it. But please know that this is a hugely important step, and the moment you or anyone else feels that while we are trying to launch this design, others are seeking to fool it, then we're going to change it and we're going to beef it up to make sure this works, to do nothing else than create a level playing field.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. In case you wonder what the 2 gentlemen are doing there, we're very efficient and also preparing for the arrival of the French president.
Thanks, guys.
Who has just landed in Antwerp, so hence the maybe slightly confusion. Can I do a personal confession?
A personal confession? Well, absolutely. Just between the 2 of us, or?
No. So we'll do that afterwards. So Dutch minimum. I'm one of the original ETS nerds in Brussels. I started ETS in 2000, went through the benchmarks with all of you. And the reason why you saw the hectic news on ETS, and I would say the campaign in Politico, I didn't think it was news, is that sometimes I now, after 20 years of ETS, feel I might have gone the wrong direction. And one of the reasons is that if you look at sites in Geleen and Douwen, Terneuzen and others, if the electricity is not there, you might still have free allocation, but it's still a carbon cost and it's hurting you, and your only way out is to close, because you talk to TenneT and they say 12 years later there's a problem. And that is, I think, where you hear the urgency now from the companies. They see nowhere to go, but the 22nd of February, the Climate Change Committee halves your benchmark. Now, that is one element, but I'll combine it. The second one is that we finally have a CBAM, and Svein Tore is sitting here. 2 farmers come to the street, and the Commission drops the CBAM. I'm doing it a bit quick and dirty. Can you react on that one?
I'm in politics, so I love feedback, and I'm also very much used to it. But this is a small acceleration, even by your standards, isn't it?
I try.
We're going to talk CBAM and fertilizers first, right? And then I'm sure I'm back on ETS in a sec.
Sure, and thank you for the opportunity. At Yara International, we're in the fertilizer space, and we have prepared for CBAM for a number of years. We've reduced our emissions by 50%, meaning that we've taken all the low-hanging fruits, all the medium challenging, and now we're on the hard-to-abate part. And we're actually right now in the final stages of finalizing the largest industrial CCS project in Europe, in the Netherlands, to sequester CO2. It'll be operational in third quarter this year, and that will take 800,000 tons a year for the next 15 years. So it's a really meaningful project. And CBAM is here to create a level playing field, and we fully support the thinking around that from our part of the industry. But what took years to plan and implement, it was implemented on January 1st, and then on January 7th, significant confusion was created by the Commission, where there are talks about suspending, pausing, possibly with retroactive impact, and this kind of uncertainty is very unwelcome when we have these kinds of investments. So what could be done here in order to restore predictability and certainty about CBAM for our sector? Thank you.
I think it is a very fair ask, and I just have to admit that not everything we do is always the gold standard, to phrase it diplomatically. Frankly speaking, I think we need to have a more fundamental conversation with your sector on how we're going to make that work. Why? What is the current situation? And you know these numbers much better, and indeed you've done an amazing job with your company, but also many others in the sector. We're facing a fertilizer sector in Europe that has 30% under capacity. I think that's roughly the number. We have a lot of our farmers and a lot of our companies actually importing dirty stuff from all countries, Russia, rather than making sure we make a grand bargain in Europe where we're actually producing much more cleanly and where we want to produce even more cleanly. And to me, that is a market failure we do need to fix. So there are a couple of things I had in mind when I was thinking about this session in terms of follow-up. And more than happy to talk about chemicals in a sec, because I know quite a number of people are also pressed there for, okay, what can we do together? But let's make sure we have that dialogue on fertilizers. I think there's a war to be won. It is mind-boggling that in some countries, indeed, on the one hand, you have people going to the streets, and at the same time, you have the companies who have idle capacity that could actually feed into the demand. So we have a supply and demand issue that we need to fix. So I'm very much willing to do that. Let's make sure we have the dialogue with you, but also with others in the sector. And what I will then do is make sure I will involve others in the Commission, because in the end, you need to have a, let's say, a Commission approach to this.
Thank you very much. Alex, Vioneo is a name that I think rings a bell with the Commissioner.
Thank you, Marco. Commissioner, good to see you again and your team. I think from our perspective, fossil-free plastics for SIDS. My specific question today was to talk about demand stimulation. One of the hardest problems we have as a new entrant into the market is clarity for our potential customers, where legislation's going, etc. To get project finance, I need to sign 10-year take-or-pay deals at a premium. And obviously that's a hard one for customers to swallow without knowing how renewable carbon products will be treated in the future. I was wondering if you could explain how regulatory certainty can be given to them.
Yeah, no, a very good point. And by the way, I think our teams are already in dialogue about avoiding any temptation of geographies outside of Europe. More than happy to have that and to continue that dialogue. But I think what you're asking for is hugely important. Let me say two things about it. One is, all of you will continue to be disappointed by the level of predictability politicians all over the world will deliver, but you need to continue to bang the table for why this is so important and why, whereas on the one hand for politicians, 1 week is a long time, as the saying goes, but you are having investment cycles that in some industries are decades. So please bear with me, this is the one thing I think is also very high on my to-do list, demand predictability. That is, by the way, exactly what I've tried to do with the 2040 agreement. Articulate where Europe wants to go. Articulate how we're matching climate competitiveness and independence. Articulate which flexibilities we are baking into the system. And then to your second point, because that is where we can do much more, I think, in making predictability practical. What we now have done, also in the car package, but more broadly in steel, is making sure we create a market for cleaner products. That in the end is going to be to the advantage of everyone, because prices will go down as you produce more volume. And that should be the way forward in many industries. Now, you cannot do that by regulation, and that's one of the things, one of the levers we're currently pulling in steel, but we're going to make that broader. The other thing I'm absolutely determined to do is leverage the full power of the purse of the government. If you were to add up what local, regional, national and EU levels are spending, is roughly 15%, 1/5 of European GDP. So it's huge. And now typically in our procurement processes, the main driver that we're hunting is lowest possible price.